Folks, we have a great actor on with us. We're going to talk about some great films coming up. Foxcatcher is one that I know that we've talked about here, and we've previewed just a little bit. But he's also part of Simon West's new film called Wild Card. We have with us Lee Perkins. Lee, how are you doing, my friend?
I'm doing great. Thanks very much for having me on.
Awesome. I know Foxcatcher opens wide. That would be November 14th. But give everybody a little overview first of the film itself and then what your role is.
Sure. They don't want us to say a whole lot about the film just because they made us sign an agreement that I'd have to give away my firstborn child. But basically, the story is about John DuPont from the DuPont family, a very wealthy family, and he had a love for wrestling, and he got involved with these two wrestlers that had won gold in the Olympics in the Grecan style wrestling, which is a little bit different than the wrestling you see in high school. And it was Mark Schultz and Dave Schultz got involved with him, and then unfortunately it didn't turn out well as it should have. And that's kind of the story behind it.
I know Channing Tatum has a big role in this film. Steve Carell plays John DuPont, that you kind of summarized. Now, you play a U.S. Army corporal. Are you able to really say too much about what your role is?
No, not a lot. Again, they've really asked us not to say
Okay.
much about it, so I'm not trying to be, too clever here. But basically, John DuPont, Steve Carell's character, has ordered something from the Army, and I'm in charge of delivering it. And let's just say, I guess I'm not very good at my job, so I kind of get it handed to me by Mr. DuPont. It's in the trailer a little bit. You can see kind of DuPont not being very pleased with the Army and their lack of delivering what he has ordered exactly as he wanted it. So it's a little conflict for Mr. DuPont.
All right, well, we'll definitely include the trailer in this part of this interview to make sure that that's easier for folks to kind of connect the dots on there,
Yes.
folks. But let's talk about director Bennett Miller a little bit about and his approach on the film. What was it like working with him?
Bennett's really interesting. He's an amazing director. I'm sure every actor always says that about their directors, but Bennett's really different. It was a very quiet set. He set a tone so that it really made it easier to work on the film. And he said some really interesting things to me. The nice thing about it, I'm a supporting player, and when you're in a big film like this and a supporting player, you never know how you're going to get treated. And Bennett treated me the same way they was treating Tatum or Carell. He treats everybody with respect. And he basically said, he goes, listen, either it works or it doesn't, and we either fix it or throw it away. And that's the way we work through every scene. It's like if there was a moment that wasn't working for him, we either tried to fix it, and if it wasn't working, then it just went out the door and we moved on. It's very freeing to shoot with Bennett, but very demanding in a good way. He really knows how to push an actor's buttons and move you to a higher level. He's truly amazing.
Obviously, you have some scenes there with Steve Carell. People, of course, really associating with all of his comedic work. I know he's done some great dramatic pieces as well. But what was he like approaching such a heavy piece in a tone like this?
Steve was interesting. I was very fortunate. When I shot, I was shooting about the end of the first week when I shot my big major scene with Steve, and Channing's also in that scene. But most of my stuff is with Steve. And the amazing thing about shooting at that time is that everybody's still gelling on a long shoot, so you're getting to know the family. Steve was pretty amazing. He's a very giving actor. He he just was really into it. It was just a really interesting thing. I had never met Steve before. He's a very, very nice man, but when he was in that DuPont, he was a different guy. He walked differently, he talked differently, he breathed differently. I mean, that's the thing that amazed me. I've seen the film now twice. It's a total transformation. It's really pretty amazing what he's done.
Did you have those moments where you get to tell your family, your friends, you're on a set with Channing Tatum and Steve Carell? Because that's got to be kind of cool.
Yeah, it is cool, but honestly, I came from a sporting background,
Right.
and I was taught from a very young age if you idolize someone, you'd never be able to compete with them. Now, in acting, you're not competing with them, but I've always had that thing is it's like, well, if I've been hired, I'm, on the set equal with anybody else. I'm, not trying to sound arrogant or anything, but that's just the way I function. And so it's cool being with those guys. It's probably cooler being with them after the fact, like going to the Toronto Film Festival and that kind of stuff, and seeing how the other half lives. I mean, I'm a ham and egger. I'm working actor that just goes from project to project. Those guys are, yeah, they got the spotlight on them, man. It's pretty
Right.
amazing to watch. It's and how they handle it is very gracious. Um, it's really everything that they're getting, they deserve, because honestly, they are very, very nice people.
If you're jumping in late with this, we're talking to Lee Perkins about the film Foxcatcher. It opens wide November 14th, directed by Bennett Miller, starring Steve Carell and Channing Tatum. And Lee has a great role, kind of ambiguous here on some of the details. We'll link to the trailer so you can get a good feel for the film. And definitely a great it sounds like just a great insight on the biopic nature of what Steve Carell's transformation was, and it's where a lot of the buzz has been so far. Is this is going to be a very big defining role for him in his career. Lee, you also got a great chance to work with Simon West, and the film's called Wild Card. It's a remake of an old thriller called Heat. Can you tell us a little bit about that project?
Yeah, sure. I mean, Simon's a really cool guy and another great director. He was fun to be with. That was a different type of set. It was a different type of energy. I worked opposite uh, Jason Statham and Hope Davis. It is the remake of the old Burt Reynolds film Heat. It was originally titled Heat. Now they've changed it to Wild Card. I'm not sure when it's coming out. It should be coming out shortly, but I mean, obviously with Jason Statham in there, it's a lot of action, but it was a really fun thing. I mean, I played. They sent me to school to learn how to be a dealer for the casinos, and then they brought in the real dealers from Las Vegas. So it's a fun deal. It's pretty cool being around Jason. Jason's a hard-working guy. You can see that he's very dedicated to be where he is and wants to stay there. And yeah, it was another. I know it sounds like so actory thing, saying, "Oh, these are great sets," but honestly, those two were very good good sets to work with, which is not always the case, but very gracious people enjoying being there, and it might be because they were shooting outside of Hollywood. Hollywood sometimes can put a damper on things, but I think a lot of times when people come to shoot in locations, they loosen up a bit. They loosen the ties and really enjoy themselves.
Well, that's always great to hear. We hear that a lot about a lot of these guys, that we're talking about. You mentioned Tatum and Statham in particular, but we hear that they're such nice and giving people. They've achieved this point in life, but very rarely do you hear the horror story. The horror stories usually come out when somebody's angry about something, and next thing you know, you can't tell the truth from the fiction sometimes. But it's great to hear you had such a good experience. We'll find out more details on that, folks. That's called Wild Card, the remake of a Burt Reynolds film called Heat. I don't have a release date for you. I don't have that in my notes either, so I'm not quite sure on that. We'll have to dig a little bit. But you also have some other great work that you're doing, and I kind of want to hurry through it a little bit because I only want to get to your background. It's fascinating. Formula 3 driver, worked on ESPN, all sorts of great stuff that we can share with this. But you did a couple, let you plug a little bit, Girl in Woods and another film called Branded.
Yeah, those are great films. Those are smaller films. Girl in Woods was a film we shot in Tennessee, and it's funny how life goes. I did a film called Katie Bird, and a reviewer really liked it, and he was friends with these guys that were doing Girl in Woods, and they needed to do a reshoot. The producers wanted to reshoot and recast some people, and so they he knew the producers, and he recommended me and brought me in and got to work opposite Charisma Carpenter, who people would know her from Angel and Buffy, and also worked with Jason London. And it was, it was a really interesting thing. That film's very personal to me because the guy that brought me in, Rusty White, has now passed away. So he got to see the rough cut, which I haven't even seen. So it's one of those weird situations in life where a guy did something really nice to me, really touched me, and then now it's not here. It's weird how life goes sometimes. Sorry to be such a downer, but it's Rusty was it's nice when people reach out and do something for you.
Well, we don't
So
want
I'll
to talk
tell you,
about it from a downer angle. Let's focus on, that Rusty did,
yeah,
his legacy will live on because of that story, right? Because he's the charitable, nice, giving,
yeah,
good-hearted person, and that's what needs to be remembered, not the fact that, he passed. We all pass away, but he made his mark and made his mark on your life and your career, and that's a great story to share with us.
yeah, it is. It's just I guess the message to everybody out there is sometimes you really do have to stop and smell the roses because no one's promised a tomorrow.
Yeah.
But the weird thing about that film, and again how things work. So I got to know Jason London a little bit. He mentioned about Branded. I knew the director from years ago, the same film that Rusty had reviewed, and so I worked on Branded, which we shot about this time last year in Lake Tahoe. And it's the first time that Jason London and Jeremy London had ever worked together. So that was really cool. So it was the first time the brothers have ever been together, and so that should be. I think that film's coming out in January. It's a futuristic film,
Yeah,
a
it's
lot
got
of
like a
action.
apocalyptic sort of nature to it, right?
Yeah, yeah, it's all futuristic and it has flashbacks to it. And I had a really cool role of a judge where got to play basically two different age categories where they aged me up and then brought me back. But it becomes a very brutalistic society where a hand for a hand, an eye for an eye type of thing.
Well, it's a great role. Obviously, born in Tennessee, grew up here near us, and we're actually based out of Florida. You grew up over in St. Pete, moved out to Cali, but you also ended up down a kind of a different turn here, where you ended up as a Formula Three driver, did work over in Europe, and then of course after that you ended up in as a reporter for you. That's quite a journey for you, my friend. Now landing in acting.
Yeah, it's weird. I mean, I've been an actor my whole life. Never thought anything about doing it professionally, and I ended up doing a movie through the racing background called Free Jack.
I remember it. I remember it.
And
I remember it well. Emilio Estevez. I have no notes, by the way. Emilio Estevez,
yep.
Mick Jagger. I love that film. Actually, I think it was really cool idea.
Yeah, they were on a high. They just come off Young Guns, and it's a big movie back then in 1990. It was like a 42 million dollar film, first time ever on set, and I'm working with Emilio, and I'm like, man, I didn't realize. It sounds so silly nowadays, but it's like, wow, people really make money at this, don't they? And and the next thing you know is it's like, okay, I'm gonna buckle down and get the acting bug going again, and it opened a lot of doors for me.
So, how did you go? Obviously, touch on the Formula Three driving thing.
Right.
That's an interesting passion in and of itself to be able to go down that road and then make the commitment to move to Europe and go out on the tour and then be part of the actual Formula Three championship and then of course and then moving away from that to actually be more like a ESPN reporter.
Yeah, you never know where things are gonna go, but it's like I said, I always played sports my whole life, and if you would have told me, asked me when I was 15 years old what I was doing, I would have thought I'd make a living from sports. But with the racing, it took off, and I went as far as I could go. And they have a saying in racing: you kind of run out of talent. And so I kind of went as far as I went, and I mean, I did a lot of neat things. I was the first American to ever compete in the Italian Formula Three Championship and things like that. But just couldn't get to the top rung of the ladder where I wanted to go. And at that point, ESPN had started to draw lines in the sand where you couldn't work for competing networks. They wanted to build their own fan base. and because of my racing background and the acting background, I was able to start doing commentating, which I really enjoyed. And I would have probably kept doing it, but once 9/11 hit, I just couldn't get on a plane anymore. I was just so tired of the whole thing and everything. And back, it's a long story, but the 9/11 thing really took some wind out of a lot of our sails that were traveling all the time, because I was gone 3 weekends out of a month, and it just wasn't the same to travel anymore. And so the acting was taking off, and I said, I'm going to just concentrate on the acting right now.
Well, you had some great opportunities and some great mentors. So I kind of want to give you a chance to talk about that experience, because you obviously started going to the, studying the Meisner technique and those kinds of things. So touch on that a little bit and kind of give some people an insight on how that was part of your journey.
Yeah, as an actor, at least I always figured, you got to study with the best. And so when I studied a lot of different methods, and one of the things I wanted to do is to find the best people. And Meisner, I'd always had read about it and watched some videos and respected. And so when I was in Los Angeles, I studied at Playhouse West, where Jeff Goldblum was one of the founding members with Sanford Meisner. They opened it up on the West Coast, which originally Meisner's Playhouse was in New York. And so I studied with Jeff. At that point, Jeff wasn't acting as much, and so he was actually teaching quite a bit. So I got to study about 8 months with Jeff, which was really a trip, because he's just so much fun to be around. He was single back then, and I'm telling you, he was a fun guy to be around. He just I'm not saying anything wrong with Jeff or anything, but he's just, what you see on TV when he does an interview, that's just Jeff. What you see is what you get. He's a fun guy, and it was just fun. He was always out playing the piano, and just had just a ton of girls. And I'll tell you what, if you were a tall girl, Jeff was always looking. But so anyway, but I enjoyed studying with Jeff, and at that time, let's see, James Franco was also there, and Scott Kahn. So I enjoyed that. But I also have a classical background. I studied when I used to live in London, or in England. I lived outside of London. I studied at RADA. So I tried to just study about every method to try to be as well-rounded as I can as an actor.
Well, it's great to see that finally manifest itself, and the career's just really, tightening up and being real strong for you. A couple of great projects. We've enjoyed really talking to you. Lee Perkins, folks. Foxcatcher comes out first. That's November 14th. You definitely don't want to miss that. We'll link to the trailer, get you caught up a little bit on some of the other information you talked about. Wild Card, Girl in Woods, Branded, a ton of different projects coming on, and it's great. It's great. We're real happy for you, brother, and we hope to hear from you again.
Thanks, man. And let me make a really quick correction. I kept on saying Jason London. It's Jeremy London. I got the twins confused. It was Jeremy London that I did Girl in the Woods, and then Jason London is one I worked with on Branded. So there you go. Well, what can I tell you? I'm an actor.
Well, they are twins, brother. I'm sure they get that. They get that a couple times. So I'm sure we'll give us some forgiveness. If nothing else, maybe we'll use that excuse that they got to call in. They got to give me an interview to keep the facts straight. So
there you go.
All right, Lee. Thank you again for your time.
All right, thanks, man. I appreciate it. Take care.